The story of Achilles begins not with the hero himself, but with a cosmic disruption that would reshape the balance between gods and mortals. Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, found himself confronted with a prophecy that threatened his very reign. The sea nymph Thetis, daughter of the ancient sea god Nereus and one of the 50 Nereids who dwelt in Mediterranean's deepest caverns, possessed a beauty that captivated both Zeus and his brother Poseidon. Her silver hair flowed like ocean currents, and her eyes held the depth of abyssal waters. Yet it was not her physical allure that would determine her fate, but rather the words of the fates themselves. Prometheus the Titan, who had already earned Zeus's eternal enmity for stealing fire, delivered a warning that would echo through the ages. Any son born to Thetis would surpass his father in strength and glory. The implication struck Zeus like a thunderbolt of his own making. Should he father a child with a sea nymph, that offspring would inevitably overthrow him just as Zeus had overthrown Kronos, who had in turn overthrown Ouranos before him. The cyclical nature of divine succession, which had governed the cosmos since its inception, suddenly presented an unacceptable risk. Rather than face this potential catastrophe, Zeus made a calculated decision, one that would forever alter the trajectory of both divine and mortal realms. He decreed that Thetis must marry a mortal man, ensuring that any child she bore would be bound by human limitations despite inheriting her divine essence. The chosen mortal was Peleus, king of the Myrmidons in Thessaly, a warrior whose reputation for courage and honor had reached even the heights of Olympus. Peleus had proven himself in numerous battles, his bronze-tipped spear claiming countless enemies, and his leadership had transformed the Myrmidons from a scattered tribe into a formidable military force. The courtship between the mortal king and the divine sea nymph proved far from conventional. Thetis, possessing the shape-shifting abilities common to her kind, had no intention of submitting easily to this arranged union. When Peleus first approached her on the shores near his kingdom, she transformed into a serpent, her scales gleaming like polished bronze in the sunlight, her forked tongue tasting the air for danger. Undeterred, Peleus maintained his grip. She shifted into a lioness, her golden mane whipping in the sea breeze, powerful muscles rippling beneath her tawny hide as she roared her defiance. Still, the mortal king held fast. Through fire and water, bird and beast Thetis exhausted her repertoire of transformations. Yet Peleus's determination never wavered. Chiron, wisest of centaurs, had advised the king that persistence would ultimately triumph over divine caprice. Finally acknowledging both the futility of her resistance and perhaps recognizing something admirable in Peleus's unwavering resolve, Thetis resumed her natural form and consented to the marriage Zeus had ordained. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis became the most magnificent celebration the world had ever witnessed. Mount Pelion, chosen for its proximity to both sea and sky, was transformed into a divine amphitheater. The Olympian gods descended from their celestial realm, their radiance illuminating the mountainside with otherworldly light. Apollo brought his golden lyre, its music weaving melodies that made even the stones weep with beauty. Dionysus provided wine that flowed like rivers, its intoxicating essence heightened by divinity. The muses sang in harmonies never before heard, their voices creating symphonies that seemed to reshape reality itself. Hephaestus, divine craftsman, forged gifts of unparalleled artistry. Golden goblets that never emptied, armor that could turn aside any mortal blade, and jewelry that captured the light of stars. Other gods contributed magnificent offerings, each striving to outdo the rest in generosity and splendor. Centaurs galloped across the mountainside, their hooves striking sparks from the rock, while nymphs danced among the trees. Their laughter like silver bells carried on the wind. Yet one divine figure remained absent. Eris, goddess of discord and strife, had been deliberately excluded. The gods, seeking harmony, believed her presence would only bring conflict. This slight, however, proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. Eris appeared at the height of the festivities, her dark robes billowing like storm clouds, her eyes burning with the fury of the wronged. In her hand she carried a golden apple inscribed with the words "to the fairest." This seemingly simple fruit, later known as the apple of discord, was crafted with malicious precision to exploit vanity even among gods. When Eris cast the apple into the midst of the feast, it rolled to a stop before three goddesses: Hera, queen of the gods, and Zeus's wife Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Each claimed the apple as rightfully hers, their divine pride refusing to yield to another. The dispute that erupted would one day lead to the Trojan War, though none present could yet foresee it. Zeus, recognizing the impossibility of choosing between his wife, his daughter, and his ally, declined to judge. Instead, he delegated the decision to Paris, a Trojan prince whose mortal perspective might bring neutrality where divine pride could not. This decision too would prove disastrous, though, that knowledge still slept in the mists of time. After their divine wedding, Peleus and Thetis established their home in Thessaly, where the CNIMF adapted with mixed success to the rhythms of mortal life. The palace, built from massive limestone blocks quarried from nearby mountains, stood on a hill overlooking the Aegean Sea, allowing Thetis to remain close to her realm. Tall columns supported a cedar roof, while bronze-fitted doors opened to courtyards where olive trees cast their shade and fountains murmured with waters that recalled her oceanic origins. When Thetis discovered her pregnancy, her divine nature awakened a fierce and protective instinct. She understood that her child would inherit both mortal essence, a union of danger and possibility. The prophecy that had driven Zeus to arrange her mortal marriage now took on new weight. Her son would not threaten the king of gods directly, yet he would still carry the potential to surpass all men. Determined to strengthen his gifts while shielding him from mortality, Thetis turned to desperate measures, seeking ways to make her child immortal. Her first method was the ritual of purification by fire, a divine practice perilous for mortal flesh. Each night, after Peleus had retired, she took the infant to the hearth, where sacred flames burned for Hector. Holding him above the fire, Thetis sought to burn away his mortal weakness, while her immortal essence shielded what was divine within him. The baby's skin glowed with otherworldly light as the flames touched him, yet he showed no sign of pain or fear. Instead, he seemed to draw strength from the fire, his small fists clenching with power no mortal infant should possess. Night after night this ritual continued, with Thetis carefully observing her son's transformation. She watched the mortal elements of his nature slowly diminish, burned away by the purifying flames, like dross separated from precious metal. His skin began to glow with a luminous sheen that spoke of divinity, and his strength grew far beyond any normal infant's development. The process was working slowly, but surely granting him the immortality that would shield him from mortal fate. However, Peleus discovered the nocturnal ritual by accident. Unable to sleep one night, his mind troubled by border raids and threats, he rose to pace his palace halls. What he saw in the great hall defied all reason. His wife stood outlined by flame, holding their infant son directly above the fire. To mortal eyes unaccustomed to divine workings, it appeared as though Thetis was attempting the unthinkable, murdering their child by fire. Peleus's anguished cry shattered the sacred silence required for the ritual's completion. His intervention, born of love, but rooted in mortal misunderstanding, disrupted the delicate enchantment at its most crucial moment. The flames faltered and died, leaving the child only half transformed, no longer advancing toward full immortality. Thetis turned to her husband, her eyes blazing with fury that rivaled the interrupted fire. The chance was lost forever. The ritual could not be repeated. Their confrontation revealed the chasm between mortal and divine thought. Peleus, with human reasoning, saw only attempted infanticide, while Thetis saw the ultimate act of protection. She tried to explain how the sacred fire would have burned away mortality while preserving divine essence, but Peleus could not comprehend. To him, fire meant destruction, not transformation. Realizing that her husband's fear had doomed their son to mortality, Thetis resolved to attempt one final act of preservation. She had heard whispers among her sister Nereids of the river Styx, the black current dividing the living from the dead. Its waters held terrible power, granting invulnerability to any who survived immersion. Yet the risk was immense, for the Styx could as easily drag the living into its depths. Without telling Peleus, Thetis departed Thessaly with her infant, journeying toward the shadowed threshold of the underworld. She crossed lands between worlds where reality wavered like mist. Forests whispered secrets in languages older than mankind. Mountains pierced the sky and vanished into unmoving clouds. Valleys where shadows fell upward marked her path to the boundary of death. The river Styx appeared at last, a ribbon of utter darkness cutting through a landscape of grey stone and eternal dusk. Its current moved with the inevitability of fate, bearing the fears and hopes of countless souls toward unseen ends. No living creature dwelt near its banks, for the river drained life itself. Even Thetis, divine though she was, felt the chill of entropy as she knelt beside the flowing blackness. Grasping her son firmly by the right heel, Thetis lowered him into the Styx's icy current. The infant convulsed as the river's power surged through him, his flesh hardening beyond bronze, more resilient than any forged armor. Every part of him the water touched became impervious to blade, arrow, or stone. The transformation was complete save for one fatal detail. The heel, the part she held, remained untouched by the Styx's power. One tiny point of mortality persisted within his otherwise invulnerable body. Insignificant then, but destined to define his fate. When Thetis returned to Thessaly, her bond with Peleus lay in ruins. He could not understand the desperation that drove her, and she could not forgive his interference. The divide between mortal and divine had grown unbridgeable. At last, Thetis left the mortal world, returning to her father's palace beneath the sea, leaving behind the son she had fought so fiercely to protect. The child, now named Achilles, remained in Peleus's care, to be raised as a mortal prince despite his divine blood. The name carried prophecy, grief of the people. A warning wrapped in a blessing. Even in infancy, his nature marked him as extraordinary. He grew with impossible speed. Where other infants struggled for months to lift their heads, Achilles managed it within weeks. His grip bent bronze. His cries shook the palace walls. Servants whispered about his golden hair that caught and held sunlight even in shadow, and eyes that gleamed with ancient wisdom. As he grew, his speed and grace astonished all. He ran faster than boys twice his age, his feet barely touching the ground. Peleus watched with pride and unease. The boy's gifts defied mortal limits. He could leap walls, catch arrows in flight, and move with a precision no tutor could match. Prophecy hung over him like a shadow. Seers who visited Peleus's court fell silent upon meeting the child. They saw two paths, each blazing with destiny. One promised long years, peaceful rule, and a quiet death followed by forgetfulness. The other, brief as a falling star, offered immortal fame, bought with mortal life. Deeds sung forever, but youth sacrificed to legend. Though Achilles knew nothing of it, his father bore the weight of that prophecy each day. He longed to protect the boy, yet feared that protection itself might defy his nature. By the time Achilles neared 7 years, his powers had grown too great for palace walls to contain. Play with other noble children had already led to accidents, a broken arm here, a shattered toy there. Tutors could not keep up with his restless energy. The answer came unexpectedly from the mountain itself. Chiron, wisest of centaurs, sent word to Peleus. He would accept the boy as his pupil on Mount Pelion. This offer carried extraordinary weight, for Chiron had trained many of the greatest heroes of ages past. Unlike his wilder brethren, Chiron possessed wisdom that rivaled the gods. Educated by Apollo and Artemis in healing, music, archery, and prophecy, His gift for shaping youths into legends was known throughout the world. Mount Pelion rose from the Thessalian plains, its slopes blanketed with oak, pine, and wild olive. Caves and hidden valleys offered perfect grounds for training far from luxury and distraction. Ancient springs bubbled from stone, their waters said to strengthen both body and spirit. Isolation ensured that every pupil was shaped by focus and endurance alone. Chiron's dwelling lay within a vast cave on the mountain's eastern face, lit by the first rays of dawn each morning. Over centuries, he had transformed these chambers into a school of the heroic arts. One held scrolls and tablets on warfare, medicine, and strategy. Another served as an armory lined with practice staves, bronze blades, and shields forged by master smiths. A third chamber housed musical instruments, healing tools, and star charts tracking the dance of celestial bodies. Chiron himself inspired awe. His human torso rose from the body of a chestnut stallion 6 feet high at the shoulder, muscular and gleaming like polished wood. His human features bore the dignity of centuries' silver-streaked hair and beard, deep-set eyes heavy with knowledge. His hands, gentle in care, calloused from labor and battle, spoke of mastery through ages. Achilles arrived at Mount Pelion with a retinue of servants and guards, but Chiron dismissed them at once. The centaur's philosophy demanded self-reliance from the first day. Noble birth meant nothing here. Every student began equal, tested by the same trials, judged by the same standards. The daily regimen reflected Chiron's total vision of heroism. Before dawn, training began. The boy ran steep mountain paths bearing heavy stones, building strength and endurance. He swam through icy torrents, learning to move through water, even in armor. He climbed trees for agility, hurled rocks for accuracy and might. Weapon training started not with steel but with the staff. Chiron taught balance, stance, timing the rhythm of movement itself. Only after mastery of the staff did Achilles touch true weapons. The spear became his focus, his destined tool of war. Chiron's collection of spears, light javelins for accuracy, heavy war spears for endurance, taught different lessons. The centaur's own weapon, a flawless creation of bronze and ash, served as a symbol of perfection. Under Chiron's guidance, Achilles learned 17 classical spear forms. The overhead thrust, driven by shoulder and back, piercing bronze at close range, the underhand strike, swift and unseen sweeping blows to knock foes off balance. He mastered defense, turning aside blades while striking in the same motion. His natural speed and precision astonished even his teacher. What took others months, Achilles learned in weeks. Soon he linked attack and defense into seamless chains of motion, each strike flowing into the next. Chiron devised harder tests, new opponents, varied terrain, forcing the young warrior to adapt, to think, to move with intuition. Swordsmanship followed, but always as a secondary art. The sword, Chiron said, is for when the spear is lost. Bronze blades required delicacy, edge alignment, precision, and care beyond iron's tolerance. Achilles learned to read opponents from the smallest motion, a shift of weight, a flicker in the eyes, and to counter before a strike began. He practiced against multiple foes, using movement, timing, and angle to keep them divided and vulnerable. Archery revealed yet another gift. His vision reached impossibly far, and his hands were steady as stone. He struck targets others could scarcely see. He calculated wind and distance, sending arrows through armor with effortless grace. But Chiron's lessons went beyond battle. Medicine was sacred to him. To heal, he said, is the twin of strength. Achilles learned every herb of the mountain plants that closed wounds, soothed fever, or dulled pain. He mastered the making of poultices, tinctures, and salves as carefully as he learned to hone a blade. Surgery, crude yet vital, followed, removing arrowheads, setting broken bones, cleansing wounds to prevent infection. He practiced on injured animals, swift, precise, and calm. Music, too, was essential. It trained mind and soul the counterbalance to war. Achilles learned the lyre, his fingers gaining dexterity that mirrored weapon work. Through harmony, he learned timing, and through rhythm, control. He sang as he played, for Chiron taught that a true hero must inspire not only with deeds, but with voice. The songs of past heroes taught him virtue and restraint. Epic tales revealed how wisdom often outshines might. He memorized hundreds of verses, building both eloquence and discipline. Chiron's moral lessons were relentless. Honor time stood above all. Not pride alone, but the sacred bond of courage, loyalty, and duty to gods and men. He taught by example. During hunts, Achilles learned never to take more than needed, never to harm the helpless, always to share the spoils. In mock battles, he learned that victory without honor meant nothing. Fairness became instinct. Pride, when tempered by purpose, was a virtue, not a flaw. True pride, Chiron said, is meeting your own highest standard again and again. This code became Achilles' compass: honor before safety, reputation before comfort, glory before longevity. A hero keeps his word, faces the impossible, and chooses death before disgrace. Other young heroes trained beside him, a brotherhood destined for legend. Patroclus, older, exiled for tragedy, became his dearest companion. Their bond grew deeper than friendship, part brotherhood, part devotion. Patroclus' gentleness balanced Achilles' fiery spirit. He excelled in healing, soothing beasts and students alike. His calm steadied Achilles' storm. Ajax, towering son of Telamon, matched Achilles in strength, though not in speed. Their contest became legend, each pushing the other higher. Diomed's heir of Argos brought brilliance of mind to match his skill in war. Diomed's gift for analysis and his ability to craft strategy impressed even Chiron, who saw in him a born commander. He and Achilles shared mutual respect, each driven by relentless pursuit of mastery. Their differences in thought often sparked fierce debate, tempered by shared purpose. Phoenix, an older student, long under Chiron's tutelage, became an elder brother to them all. His patience, experience, and skill helped newcomers endure the mountain's discipline. His loyalty and warmth won him universal affection. The friendships formed here, tempered by hardship and shared striving, would last their lifetimes. They learned trust that never faltered, the kind forged only in training, sweat, and danger. These bonds became their armor, as vital as any weapon. Leadership came naturally to Achilles. Others looked to him instinctively, drawn by his confidence, decisiveness, and skill. Chiron nurtured this spark, guiding it away from arrogance, toward true command. Achilles learned to lead by example, to inspire through courage, not authority. He was the first to face risk, the last to yield. His refusal to accept defeat ignited everyone around him. Through him, Chiron's school became a crucible of constant growth. Yet with leadership came burden. When younger students faltered, Achilles taught them, breaking lessons into smaller steps, guiding them patiently. His compassion surprised even Chiron, a glimpse of depth beneath his burning will. Years of training forged him into more than a warrior. He had become the embodiment of heroic perfection. He could run down deer on open plains. He wielded weapons that others could scarcely lift. His mind, sharpened by strategy and study, could outthink older men in war games. Yet his greatest strength was not his body, but the code Chiron had instilled. Honor, courage, loyalty. These would define him in the battles to come. As his 18th year approached, the peace of Mount Pelion could no longer shield him. Far away in Sparta, new storms gathered. King Menelaus lived content beside his wife, Helen, whose beauty was legend. But beneath that calm, fate was already turning its wheel. The spark of the coming war traced back to that wedding feast, where Eris cast her golden apple before the gods. The judgment of Paris, the choice of the fairest, set all in motion. Aphrodite's promise to grant Paris the love of the most beautiful woman alive led him to Sparta and to Helen. He came as a diplomat, laden with gifts and flattery. Menelaus, bound by sacred law, welcomed him with feasts and hospitality, never suspecting betrayal. For hospitality was divine, protected by Zeus himself. To violate it was unthinkable. Yet Aphrodite's spell overpowered mortal vows. Helen, whether enchanted or willing, was consumed by passion. When Paris left Sparta, she left with him, taking servants and treasure alike. The king awoke to emptiness, rooms stripped bare, chambers echoing with betrayal. The shame of cuckoldry and the theft of his riches burned together like fire. He turned at once to his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, whose reach extended across Greece. Agamemnon saw more than family duty. He saw opportunity. Paris's act was not just insult, it was a threat to Greek order itself. If left unpunished, it would invite chaos. Troy's wealth, its command of trade routes, its gold and treasures offered a tempting prize. A war for honor could also be a war for riches and for unity under his command. To rally the princes, Agamemnon invoked an ancient oath sworn years before when Helen's hand was sought. In her youth, kings from every land had come bearing gifts and vows. The competition turned dangerous until Odysseus of Ithaca proposed a clever pact. All suitors would swear to defend Helen's chosen husband against any who wronged him. Each laid a hand upon the joints of a sacrificed horse blood, staining the marble floor, and swore before Zeus, Poseidon, and Athena to uphold the bond. Now the time had come to honor it. Messengers rode across Greece, summoning every suitor to arms. Some came eagerly driven by glory and greed. Others hesitated, seeking excuses, fearing loss. Odysseus himself resisted. He had a new wife, Penelope, and a newborn son, Telemachus. Peace, not war, filled his heart. When envoys reached Ithaca, they found him plowing fields with ox and donkey, sowing salt instead of seed, pretending madness. But Palamedes, shrewd among men, saw through the act. He placed the infant Telemachus before the plow. Odysseus swerved, saving his son, betraying his sanity. His ruse destroyed, he was bound to serve. Across the land, others faced the same reckoning. Bound by oath, they gathered for war. Negotiations followed over command, supply, and spoils. The fleet assembled at Aulis, its harbors crowded with black ships and restless men. Meanwhile, beneath the sea, Thetis watched in dread. Her divine sight saw the threads of fate intertwining. She knew her son would be drawn into this storm. The prophecy that had shadowed his birth now blazed with terrible clarity, a long life forgotten, or a short one, crowned with glory. Determined to save him, Thetis took mortal shape, a wandering merchant climbing Mount Pelion. She found Achilles in the midst of combat training, defeating multiple foes with ease. Pride filled her, and fear. Revealing herself, she warned him of what lay ahead of prophecies, oaths, and war. She begged him to choose life, to remain in peace and obscurity, rather than chase a glory that would demand his life. Her words carried the weight of divine foresight, for she could see what mortals could not. Yet even as Thetis pleaded with her son to shun the coming war, she knew the futility of her words. Achilles' education under Chiron had engraved in him a code that made retreat from glory impossible. Every lesson, every trial had prepared him for exactly the conflict that now approached. The same fire that made him great also made him incapable of choosing safety over honor. Realizing persuasion would fail, Thetis turned to divine cunning. She spirited Achilles away from Mount Pelion, crossing the Aegean by night to the island of Skyros. This rocky refuge, ruled by King Lycomedes, lay far from trade routes, a perfect sanctuary from Agamemnon's recruiters. Lycomedes' palace crowned the island's highest hill, white limestone walls gleaming over the sea. The king's wisdom and discretion made him the ideal ally for Thetis' deception. His court included several daughters of noble birth, the perfect veil for the hidden prince. Thetis disguised her son as a maiden, naming him Pyrrha, the flame-haired. The disguise demanded more than robes and jewels. Achilles learned to move with delicate steps, to speak softly, to adopt the modest grace expected of noble women. His beauty and youth aided the illusion: smooth skin, bright eyes, and no trace of a beard. Clad in linen chitons, adorned with fine jewelry, he passed easily among Lycomed's daughters. Visitors praised his beauty, never suspecting the truth. Life in the women's court offered lessons Chiron had not taught. He observed the rituals of domestic life, the subtle hierarchies, the quiet diplomacy between mothers and daughters, and the expectations society placed upon women. It broadened his world beyond the martial discipline of Mount Pelion. The rhythm of life was strange to him. No dawn training, no spears or shields. The days began with prayers to Athena and Artemis, followed by weaving a symbol of both artistry and virtue. Afternoons brought music and poetry. Evenings conversation and gentle games. But inactivity gnawed at him. The warrior's heart within rebelled against stillness. At night, in secret, he trained stretching, striking, leaping in silence, risking discovery each time. Months passed. Thetis hoped the war might fade before her son was found. But fate was relentless. At Achilles, the seer Calchas delivered a grim prophecy to Agamemnon. Troy could never fall without Achilles, son of Peleus and Thetis. The council was shaken. Agamemnon dispatched Odysseus, the keenest mind among the kings, to find the missing hero. Odysseus's past cunning made him the perfect choice. If anyone could pierce Thetis's ruse, it was he. He began at Phthia, where old Peleus, grieved yet guarded, refused to reveal his son's location. Hints of Thetis's interference gave Odysseus his first lead. His search spread across the isles to remote coasts, sacred caves, and islands tied to the sea gods. When whispers reached him of Skyros and of a maiden of rare grace and height, his suspicions stirred. Arriving in disguise as a merchant, he brought treasures for the royal women: fine fabrics, gleaming jewels, delicate perfumes. But hidden among them were weapons of exquisite make: swords, shields, and spears forged by master craftsmen. Lycomed's daughters gathered eagerly, admiring the merchant's wares. Among them, Pyrrha watched, but Odysseus noted the eyes, the bearing, the subtle readiness of a warrior. Then he ordered a trumpet to sound the alarm of approaching raiders. The maidens shrieked and fled save one. Pyrrha moved without thought, grabbing a bronze-tipped spear, planting her feet, scanning for threats. In that instant, the disguise fell away. No silks could hide the trained stance, the calm precision, the instinct born of battle. Odysseus had found his quarry. Achilles dropped the pretense, standing revealed in his true form, radiant and unrestrained. Relief washed over him, the burden of concealment lifted at last. Odysseus wasted no words. He spoke of prophecy, of the fleet at Achilles, and of the glory that awaited Achilles in Troy. He reminded the young hero that destiny offered two roads: a long, quiet life in obscurity, or brief, blazing immortality. The choice foretold since birth lay before him now. Achilles did not hesitate. Every fiber of his being demanded challenge and renown. To hide while others sought glory was unthinkable. He accepted the call, fully aware that he was also accepting his fate. The prophecy demanded its price. Immortality of name for mortality of flesh. Preparations for departure began at once. He thanked Lycomed and his daughters, grateful for their unwitting protection, and apologized for the deception. The king, understanding the hand of destiny, blessed the young hero's path. The voyage to Achilles marked the end of childhood and the beginning of legend. When Achilles arrived, he beheld the might of Greece united. The harbor curved like a crescent moon filled with black-hulled ships. Bronze prows glinted under the sun, rigging Crete, and voices rose in endless preparation. The sight dwarfed imagination. Over 1,000 ships, sleek scouts, and massive transports alike filled the bay. Bronze rams gleamed, warriors trained upon the decks, their armor flashing like flame. Beyond the shore, a sprawling encampment buzzed with life. Smoke from countless fires rose into the clear air, carrying the smell of roasted meat, oil, and bronze dust. Agamemnon's red and gold banners marked the center of command, a city of tents and strategy. Nearby, the Myrmidons of Thea held proud formation, their 50 black ships drawn in perfect order along the shore. Achilles' chest swelled with pride. These were his father's men, hardened by border wars, united by loyalty. Tall, disciplined, formidable, their shields bore the dolphin crest in honor of Thetis. Phoenix, the grizzled commander, had kept them ready, their discipline unbroken, their gear immaculate. While others grew restless, the Myrmidons remained steady, their camp ordered, their weapons gleaming, their watch never lax. When Achilles entered, Phoenix embraced him warmly, relieved, proud, and emotional. The men's morale surged. Their prince had come. They looked to him not just as heir but as their leader. Their faith in him was absolute. Achilles assumed command, swiftly organizing drills, testing formations, refining tactics. He reshaped the Myrmidons into a force of precision and power, ready to carve their legend into the history of the world. His innovations soon followed: new signaling methods, refined weapon techniques, and coordination systems that would prove vital in the intricate battles to come. But his integration into the expedition's hierarchy required delicate negotiation. Achilles' arrival, brilliant and disruptive, upset the fragile balance of command that Agamemnon had worked to maintain. The young hero's fame preceded him. Even before his 20th year, his name carried weight among kings. Ajax, son of Telamon, towering over men at nearly 7 feet, commanded 12 ships and 600 warriors whose loyalty was absolute. He embodied brute force, his tactics built on relentless pressure, breaking enemies through sheer endurance. Their first meeting came during a tense assembly of commanders, as Agamemnon tried to settle arguments over supplies. Ajax's presence filled the room, his booming voice rising above all others. When Achilles entered, the contrast was immediate. Where Ajax was might, Achilles was movement, grace, precision, intellect. He carried himself with quiet confidence, authority without arrogance. The assembled kings saw instantly that they stood in the presence of two living legends, each a different reflection of perfection in war. Diomedes, king of Argos, leader of 80 ships, brought a third kind of strength, tactical brilliance. He could read a battlefield as easily as others read a scroll, seeing weaknesses and turning them to advantage. Through long planning councils, Achilles and Diomedes found mutual respect. They spoke late into the night, two minds bound by strategy and vision. Agamemnon relied on them both, and though Achilles' youth brought skepticism from veterans, his insight silenced doubt. He understood logistics, supply, and coordination, proof that Chiron's education had included not only weapons but the philosophy of war. Yet no reunion meant more than that, with Patroclus arriving weeks before from Opus. Their bond, formed on Mount Pelion, had only deepened with time. Patroclus had become a warrior of skill and heart. He lacked Achilles' divine might, but his discipline and wisdom made him invaluable. He balanced Achilles' fire with calm judgment, serving as confidant, advisor, and emotional anchor. Together, they were halves of a single soul, fury and reason entwined. Patroclus' presence tempered conflict, his diplomacy smoothing rifts before they grew into feuds. Achilles' force of will could ignite tempers among other leaders, but Patroclus' steady tone often restored harmony. The integration of the Myrmidons into the larger army required skillful coordination. Dozens of contingents, each with its own customs and tactics, had to move as one. Achilles worked tirelessly to build unity and precision. He planned joint maneuvers, supply sharing, and communication signals that would keep order amid chaos. The Spartans under Menelaus favored strict discipline and phalanx control. The Athenians fluid movement and creativity. The Cretans unmatched archery. The Thessalians swift cavalry. Achilles studied them all, then forged their strengths together. He proposed new tactics, coordinating archers with infantry, using cavalry for pursuit, and synchronizing naval support with land assaults. It was a vision of combined arms far ahead of his time, and even seasoned generals were astonished. Meanwhile, Thetis continued to watch. Her divine favor shielded her son in subtle ways. She visited him in dreams or appeared beside the sea at dawn, warning him of dangers unseen by mortals. Her foresight proved true. Disputes among commanders, storms at sea all reached Achilles' ears before they could erupt. Through her influence, the Myrmidon ships found calm waters while others struggled in storms. Winds favored their sails, never enough to draw envy, but always enough to be felt. Her unseen hand gave them a reputation for flawless seamanship and luck. As departure drew near, the weight of prophecy pressed heavier upon Achilles. Without him, the seers whispered, Troy cannot fall. Every soldier looked to him now for courage, for certainty, for the promise of victory. His innovation spread quickly. His methods of training and command became the standard for the entire Greek host. But with admiration came pressure. Expectations grew like fire. He had to live up to the legend that already surrounded his name. Among the heroes, rivalry flared. Contests of strength, skill, and speed filled the days before departure. They fenced, raced, wrestled, each seeking glory. And always Achilles stood apart. Yet those rivalries, and the friendships they forged, would shape the war ahead, binding the leaders in both loyalty and competition. Weeks passed. Winds turned against them, trapping the fleet at alleys, as if the gods themselves withheld the sea. But when at last the armada reached the Trojan shore, Achilles wasted no time. The landing was chaos, waves crashing, shouts rising through the smoke of battle. Hector, son of Priam, led the Trojan defense, reinforced by allies from Asia Minor. The Greek ships advanced in formation, bronze prows cutting the sea, archers readying volleys. The beach bristled with obstacles, spikes, stones, and barricades. Arrows darkened the sky. Achilles stood at the prow of the lead Myrmidon ship, bronze armor blazing, crest streaming in the wind. His cuirass shone with engravings of gods and storms. His shield bore the dolphin, the mark of his mother. The keel struck sand. Without hesitation, he leapt into the surf water, churning around his legs as he surged toward the enemy line. The spear of Mount Ash, forged by Chiron, glinted in his hand. The first to meet him was Cycnus, son of Poseidon, king of Colonnae, whose skin could not be pierced by any mortal weapon. Towering, broad, unyielding, his armor had turned aside countless blades. His presence alone was meant to break Greek resolve. The clash drew all eyes. Combat stilled around them. A duel of demigods began. Cycnus swung his massive spear, a weapon of thunderous weight. Each strike shattered shields and arrow alike. Achilles met him with speed, circling, feinting, striking, his movements too swift to follow. His first thrust hit dead center and glanced harmlessly away. The reports were true. The Trojan was invulnerable. Achilles adapted, instantly probing, testing, forcing his enemy to tire himself out. He darted in and out, a blur of bronze and motion, while Cycnus thundered like an earthquake, each missed blow carving furrows in the sand. The fight raged nearly an hour. No blood spilled, no wounds struck. But the tide of battle began to shift, for speed, not strength, was destiny's ally that day. Cycnus's breath grew heavy. Sweat gleamed on unbroken skin. Achilles, tireless, relentless, pressed on, waiting for the moment the gods would grant him an opening. The decisive moment came when Achilles threw aside his spear, closing the distance, choosing danger. Using the grappling techniques that Chiron had taught him for armored combat in confined spaces, his hands found the leather straps that bound Cycnus' helmet. With a violent twist, his full divine strength unleashed, he turned protection into a weapon. The bronze helm, too tight to remove, cut off the Trojan's breath. The invulnerable skin did not matter when the air itself would not come. Moments later, silence. Cycnus fell. And the beach erupted in disbelief. The champion whom no weapon could pierce had been slain by wit and will, not force. Terror spread along the Trojan line. Confidence dissolved like mist in sunlight. Achilles retrieved his spear and surged forward, leading the Myrmidons in a charge that broke the enemy's defense. Their battle cry, a roar of iron and surf, rolled over the sands as they drove the Trojans inland, securing the landing for all of Greece. But that was only the beginning. While the Greeks built their camp and fortified their new beachhead, word arrived: Trojan reinforcements on the march. Among them was Troilus, youngest son of Priam, his talent and beauty, hailed as the mirror of Achilles' own. Prophecy whispered that Troy would stand unbroken while Troilus yet lived, which meant his death would open the gates. His name carried hope for Troy, as Achilles' did for Greece. The meeting came by fate: two scouts, two princes each leading small patrols through a narrow valley between hills. They saw one another, and both knew destiny had arranged it. Troilus challenged Achilles to single combat. The call was formal, almost courteous, as honor required. Their duel blazed like sunlight on bronze. The Trojan fought with elegance, his spear work precise, his defense immaculate, a student of discipline and mastery. But Achilles fought like the storm itself, speed, instinct, and divine power woven together. He pressed the attack, feint, thrust, withdraw, a rhythm too swift for mortal sight. Troilus countered again and again, but each exchange pushed him closer to the edge of exhaustion. Finally, he attempted a complex spear maneuver, one Chiron had taught Achilles to defeat. In that instant, the Greeks' counterstrike found the small gap between helm and cuirass. The bronze split, the point drove home. Troilus fell before he could cry out. The prophecy cracked, and with it, Troy's divine protection. The story of his death spread like wildfire. The young who had sworn to defend Troy felt the first tremor of fear. Achilles' name now carried the sound of inevitability. He turned his attention outward to Troy's allies, to the cities that fed her walls. His strategy was clear: cut the lifelines, isolate the great city until its power withered from within. The first to fall was Lyrnessus, a rich coastal stronghold, 30 miles south of Troy. Its towers rose from pale stone, its warehouses filled with grain, weapons, and gold. 2,000 defenders manned the walls, commanded by King Mines, a warrior famed for loyalty and cunning. Achilles surrounded the city not with brute assault, but with precision. He cut the roads, seized the water supply, sent raiders by night to burn outposts and ambush patrols. His leadership was tireless. He moved among the men, planned every strike, and led from the front, holding a narrow pass alone while engineers secured the spring that fed the city's life. When the water ran dry, the gates opened. Lyrnessus fell. Gold, silver, and arms filled the Greek wagons. And among the captives Briseis, daughter of a priest, a woman whose beauty would soon change the course of the war. At the time, she was only a prize, one treasure among many. But destiny was already watching. The victories multiplied. City after city burned. Adramyttium, Pedasus, Thebes of Echina. Each triumph brought plunder, and with it, tension. Agamemnon's pride chafed beneath Achilles' glory, and beneath the rising banners of Greece destiny began to tighten its noose. The king of Mycenae needed him, but resented needing him. And as the Greeks grew rich, so too grew envy. The balance between command and fame wavered like a blade on edge. Then came the moment that shattered it. It began with a priest, an old man of Apollo crisis, walking into the Greek camp beneath a flag of truce. He bore the sacred staff, its gold gleaming in the sun, and a ransom fit for king's silver vessels, woven robes, treasures of the temple, all to buy back his daughter. The girl, Chryses, had been captured in a raid and claimed by Agamemnon himself. When the priest approached, the soldiers grew silent. Even hardened men felt pity at the sight of a father begging for his child. He knelt before the Mycenaean king, his voice trembling. "Release her and Apollo will bless your cause." But Agamemnon, drunk on victory and arrogance, mocked him. He laughed, declaring that the girl pleased him more than his own wife, Clytemnestra, that she would remain with him forever, a prize, a possession even after Troy was ash. The insult struck deeper than the priest's heart. It struck at Apollo himself. The assembled commanders shifted uneasily. To shame a holy man to reject sacred ransom was to defy the gods. And the gods were listening. Greek custom demanded respect for priests no matter their origin. And ransom sacred under divine law was to be treated with solemn care. Agamemnon's arrogance broke both rules. His pride, swollen by power, had turned to blindness. The Greeks watched in silence, uneasy, feeling the gods' anger stirring. Chryses left the camp in despair. His plea unanswered, his heart shattered. Along the shore he walked, past ships and ramparts, the vast army glittering in the sun. And there, on the sand, the priest of Apollo prayed. He lifted his golden staff and called, not for mercy but for vengeance. The god heard, and silence broke across Olympus. From Olympus he descended Apollo, the archer, silver bow blazing with celestial fire. He stood upon the hills above the Greek camp and drew his string. The first arrows struck the mules and dogs. They convulsed, foaming, collapsing into silence. Then the horses, proud beasts of war, fell by the hundreds. The air turned thick with rot. The stench of death crawled through every tent. Next came the men. The arrows found flesh. Invisible, burning, unstoppable. Fever swept the camp. Strong warriors stumbled mid-task, their bodies aflame, their eyes glazed with delirium. By nightfall, pyres burned unending, columns of smoke rising toward Troy's distant walls. The Trojans, watching from their towers, saw the black plumes and whispered, "The gods are punishing them." Within the camp, despair. Fear spread faster than the sickness. Men muttered that the gods had abandoned them. But one man knew better, Calchas the seer. His face pale, his staff trembling. Visions of fire and plague seared his mind. When Achilles called the assembly, the army gathered in the open square, 10,000 men beneath the sun. The prophet stepped forward. White robes, golden staff, a voice heavy with dread. "The anger of Apollo," he said, "burns because his priest was shamed. The plague will cease only when Chryses is returned without ransom and with gifts of atonement to the god." Murmurs rose. All eyes turned to Agamemnon. The king's face darkened. His pride flared. He called Calchas a liar, a false prophet, a man who brought only misfortune. But the corpses piling at the gates gave the seer's words weight. Agamemnon could delay no longer. He agreed to release the girl, but with a poison clause. "If I lose my prize," he said, "I will take another equal in worth from one of you." The army froze. Everyone knew whom he meant. Achilles. His recent victories had filled his tents with spoils and with Briseis, the woman taken at Lionessus. Agamemnon's demand struck like a spear. The two men faced each other, leader and champion, power and pride. Their words became weapons. Achilles' voice cut like bronze. "You gain the wealth, but fight no battles. You sit in camp while we bleed. Now you would steal from the man who wins your wars?" Agamemnon rose from his seat. His hand clenched the scepter. "I am king of kings," he thundered. "All spoils are mine to command." Achilles' hand drifted toward his sword. The tension crackled one heartbeat away from blood. Then, unseen by others, Athena appeared beside Achilles, her hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let him fall by his own folly." The rage cooled barely. Achilles lowered his blade, but his words carried prophecy. "You will beg me to return when Hector's fire burns your ships, and I will not come." He walked away, followed by the Myrmidons, his oath echoing in the stunned silence. The camp felt hollow. The best of the Greeks had withdrawn. Even the sea seemed to grow still. From the cliffs above, Thetis felt her son's fury as if it were her own. She came to him a shimmer in the dim light, a mother, divine and sorrowful. In the privacy of his tent, Achilles told her everything. The insult, the theft, the wound to his honor. She wept, knowing what mortal pride would cost him. Then she spoke softly. "Let Zeus judge this. He will make them see your worth. The Greeks will suffer until they remember who saves them." Achilles listened silent, fierce. He agreed. And Thetis rose to Olympus to plead her son's cause before the king of gods. Zeus heard her. He remembered his debt, and he promised. He would tilt the scales just enough to make Agamemnon regret. Soon, the Greeks would lose ground. Hector would rise, and the war would burn anew. The first signs came swiftly. With Achilles gone, the lines wavered. The Trojans advanced confident, hungry for revenge. Hector led them like a storm. His attack struck where Achilles once stood, and no one could fill that space. Ajax fought bravely, towering above men like a wall of bronze, but he could not move like lightning. Diomedes strategized, but strategy could not replace fury. Without Achilles, the heart of the army, the Greeks faltered. The Trojans pushed them back to the very shore where they had first landed. The tide of war had turned. Diomedes fought like a man possessed. His mind sharp as a blade, read the battlefield with speed and clarity. Every move calculated, every shift of formation deliberate. Where others faltered, he adapted. He kept the lines from breaking, his courage giving shape to the chaos. But even his brilliance could not fill the void Achilles had left. No one could. The Greeks felt it in their arms, their hearts, their hopes. The tide had turned. Merchants whispered. Camp followers hoarded food. Rumors crept through the tents, the gods have left us. Nestor, aged and wise, watched the unraveling with sorrow. He had seen kings rise and fall, and knew the cost of pride. His face, lined like weathered stone, bore the strain of watching a dream collapse. He called for counsel. His voice trembled but carried truth. "Let us make peace," he urged. "Give Achilles what is due. Return Briseis and more. Gold, horses, treasures, and words of apology. A king's pride is not worth a nation's ruin." The proposal was fair, but fairness means little to the proud. Agamemnon bristled. His sense of kingship blinded him still. "Royal right," he said, "permits command, not compromise." His words turned iron cold. He could not grasp that Greek unity rested not on fear but on willing hearts. The council split. Some cried for reconciliation, fearing total destruction. Others warned, "Yield now, and all leaders will defy command." While they argued, Hector advanced. Every dawn brought new losses. The Trojans, once besieged, now became the besiegers. They struck the Greek lines, built their own outposts, raised palisades and stone walls faster than the Greeks believed possible. Even the engineers, hardened men of craft, stood silent at the sight of Troy's sudden efficiency. Then came the worst blow: Hector's cavalry cutting supply lines. The convoys fell one by one. Food dwindled. Armor went unrepaired. The wounded died for lack of care. Morale shattered. Men fought hungry, their minds already halfway home. In the Myrmidon camp, Patroclus watched restless. Achilles remained withdrawn, his fury locked behind silence. The Myrmidons, trained, polished bronze, kept their discipline, but the waiting gnawed at them. They were lions in cages. Patroclus moved among them, soothing tempers, carrying words between commanders, pleading with Achilles to act. He understood his friend's anger, but he also heard the screams of men dying without hope. The breaking point came when the Trojans reached the ships. Hector himself led the charge. The Greeks fought among the hulls, defending their only path of escape, the air filled with fire. Arrows darkened the sky. And then the ships burned. Smoke rolled over the sea, the scent of tar and death. Men wept openly, for they saw their doom. Ajax stood like a fortress, his shield a wall, his sword a scythe. He roared commands, holding the line by sheer will. But even he could not hold forever. From the Myrmidon camp, Patroclus saw the flames and broke. He turned to Achilles. His voice cracked with rage, grief, and love. Will you let them burn? These men are brothers, trained beside us under Chiron. You taught them honor, and now you let them die. The words struck deep. Achilles turned away silent. Then slowly he nodded. You will go, he said. But not as yourself. Patroclus froze. Achilles' hand fell on his shoulder. You will wear my armor. Take my men, the Myrmidons. Drive them from the ships, but swear do not chase them past the walls. End the fire, nothing more. Patroclus agreed, but his heart, already aflame, knew only forward. The Myrmidons armed. Bronze flashed, shields rang. Achilles' armor gleamed like dawn, the cuirass, etched with gods and monsters, the crest of his helmet blazing red, the spear polished to a mirror sheen. Patroclus donned it piece by piece, feeling the weight of legend settle on his skin. He moved as Achilles moved, his stance, his rhythm practiced. Perfect. When he stepped from the tent, men gasped. To the army, it seemed that Achilles himself had returned. The camp stirred, a wave of hope sweeping through despair. Great shouts rose again. Hector's scouts, seeing the glint of that armor, sent panic rippling through Trojan ranks. The Myrmidons formed ranks, their black shields locking together, their step thunderous and measured. Patroclus raised the spear. Achilles watched in silence. And thus began the march that would decide the fates of both. The Myrmidons advanced, their war cry rising like thunder. Bronze-tipped spears flashed, a living forest of light catching the sun as they charged. Across the field, Greeks lifted their heads, hearts stirring. And the Trojans for the first time hesitated. Patroclus struck first. His movements sharp, deliberate, deadly. He fought with the grace of a man who had learned every motion from Achilles himself. The ruse worked. The Trojans saw the shining armor, heard the name, and fear spread faster than flame. The tide turned. The Myrmidons tore through their ranks, disciplined, unstoppable, like a storm unleashed after long silence. Patroclus led from the front, his spear a blur, his mind clear, calculating. He moved with Chiron's teaching in every breath. And the Greeks, seeing him advance, found courage again. Momentum surged. The fire that had devoured the ships now burned in men's hearts, but this time it was hope. The Trojans broke. Their lines shattered. Victory, sudden and intoxicating. And Patroclus, forgetting Achilles' warning, pressed forward. He saw the enemy falter and thought, one more push, just one more victory. The chase began. past the boundary Achilles had set, beyond the safety of the ships. And in that reach fate waited. Hector watched closely. Something was wrong. The man in the armor moved well, but not that well. There was skill, not godlike power. Courage, not fury. This was not Achilles. The truth struck him like lightning, and he smiled. The duel began. Two warriors, two mirrors of greatness, each knowing only one would walk away. Bronze met bronze. Sparks rained like falling stars. Their shields rang with the sound of gods. Then a flash unseen by mortal eyes, Apollo's hand. Invisible force struck Patroclus, knocking his helmet away, loosening the armor straps. The disguise fell, and all saw the truth. Gasps spread through both armies. The illusion shattered. Hector seized the moment. His spear struck between the plates deep, fatal. Patroclus fell. The sand drank his blood. The Myrmidons froze shock in their eyes. They had followed the shadow of Achilles and watched it die. Their formation broke. Victory dissolved into chaos. And Hector, stepping forward, claimed the spoils. He took the armor, the helmet, the cuirass, the shield. The glory of Achilles now shone upon Troy's greatest son. He raised his spear, and the Trojans roared. News of the fall reached the camp, and Achilles, hearing it, collapsed. No wound of iron had ever cut so deep. The cry that left his throat was not human. It was the sound of the sea, of gods in mourning. He tore his golden hair. He rolled in dust and ash, his body trembling with grief too vast for words. All Greece heard him, even the sea heard. Far below, Thetis felt a pulse of sorrow through the waves. The ocean trembled, fish scattered. The halls of Nereus shuddered as the nymphs gathered around their sister. And Thetis, radiant, grieving, rose from the depths, silver hair streaming, feet leaving no prints on the sand. Her presence shimmered like moonlight on water. She found Achilles surrounded by the Myrmidons' men, broken not by battle, but by loss. They stood silent, their armor dented, their faces streaked with blood and salt. They had fought to the last breath and failed to save the man who had worn their prince's name. Thetis knelt beside her son. Her tears, liquid silver, fell onto his dust-covered skin. "My child," she whispered, "your path is set." Achilles lifted his head, and the look in his eyes was no longer human. Grief had become rage, pride nothing, only vengeance remained. "I will go," he said, "and none shall stand before me." But Thetis saw what he could not. The armor gone. Hector wore it now, and without it even a demigod could die. She spoke softly. "You cannot fight as you are. The armor that kept you safe is now your enemy's prize." Achilles said nothing. His jaw tightened. His fists bled. Thetis rose. "There is one who can help." And she turned toward the mountains. The dawn had no warmth when she left. Her journey led her deep beneath the earth to the halls of Hephaestus. The god of fire and forge worked among his furnaces, molten rivers, hammers ringing like thunder. The walls glowed red with heat. Weapons of gods lined the shadow shields that shone like stars, spears that could pierce the wind. When Thetis appeared, Hephaestus stopped. Steam curled around her like mist. He bowed slightly, scarred face curious. "Thetis," he said, "what brings the sea to fire?" Her voice was calm and heavy with sorrow. "My son has lost his armor," she said, "and I have come to ask you to make him new." Hephaestus looked into her eyes and nodded. "Then the world will see a work worthy of the gods themselves." Hephaestus stood in the glow of his forged muscles, corded, scarred, arms etched with the memory of fire. The leather apron he wore was blackened by metals that existed only in the realm of gods. Around him wonders no mortal hand could craft, bronze that never tarnished, iron keener than any earthly blade, gold that glowed from within a living metal, not ornament, but essence. Thetis's request was unlike any before. "Armor for my son," she said, "stronger than all that came before it. He fights beyond mortal measure, make him worthy of the divine." Hephaestus nodded once and began. The forge blazed white. Sparks fell like stars. The god's hammer struck, and the mountains echoed. He shaped the bronze for the cuirass from metals smelted in dragon's fire, a substance that sang under the blow and hardened into brilliance. The plates curved to fit Achilles' form, balanced perfectly, light as wind, unyielding as fate. The helmet demanded more protection, but vision. For Achilles fought not only with speed, but with awareness of every shadow. Hephaestus carved channels for air, vents for sound, and cheek guards shaped to deflect strikes yet preserve hearing. The crest woven from divine fibers would shimmer like a torch even in the smoke of war. Then came the greaves, bronze molded to the shape of lightning. They bent and flexed as Achilles would move, guarding speed itself. Etched upon them patterns invisible until sunlight struck, then alive with shifting light as if the metal remembered the sky. But the shield was not armor. It was a universe. Hephaestus lifted a blank disk of bronze and saw, within its circle, the story of mankind. He began at the rim, the great river Oceanus, encircling all things. The bronze shimmered like living water, tides caught mid-motion, waves frozen in song. Within that flowing border, rings of life unfurled, each more intricate than the last. At the heart, the heavens themselves, earth and sky entwined. The sun and moon cast from living metal, gold and silver, that glowed on their own. The constellations, tiny stars inlaid with divine precision, their light flickering as the shield turned. Around them, humanity. One city at peace. Wedding songs. Markets buzzing. Elders in council, merchants trading, citizens walking in sunlit streets. Each figure so finely wrought that even their gestures breathed life. The other city at war. Walls aflame, archers on towers, mothers clinging to children. Heroes charging in gleaming armor, faces captured in the instant before fate. Hephaestus forged it all, every motion, every sorrow, every triumph of mankind, as if the metal itself remembered. Even the weapons and formations were real patterns of war known to every soldier. And when he was done, the forge fell silent. For within that single shield beat the pulse of heaven and earth, and the destiny of Achilles was ready to burn again. The next circle of the shield told a quieter story, the rhythm of the earth itself. Fields in sunlight. Men and women bent to the plow, their hands shaping life from soil. The bronze figures seemed to move, each furrow a heartbeat, each seed a prayer. Seasons turned in metal, plowing, planting, harvest, threshing, the endless song of survival. Every tool, every gesture, crafted with reverence for labor itself. Vineyards climbed the hills, workers gathered grapes heavy with light. One youth strummed a lyre, his bronze fingers frozen mid-chord, and yet the melody seemed to linger. Cattle grazed in pastures, herdsmen calling softly, their dogs circling the edges of the herd. Every beast unique, every motion alive. And then, a lion. Its jaws open in eternal strike, a reminder that even in peace, danger waits. Then came the final band, dancers in celebration. Men and women joined in motion, arms linked, faces radiant. The light played across their garments, jewels, linen, hair. One could almost hear the flute, feel the rhythm. And with the dawn the gods' creation waited, shining for vengeance. It was life not divine, but human, and Hephaestus caught it perfectly. The gods stepped back. The shield blazed with meaning, earth, sky, war, peace, love, death, all bound in bronze. He turned next to the spear. Its point forged from metal that could not dull, its haft cut from ash that grew in the realm of gods. flexible, unbreakable, balanced to Achilles' own throw. When the work was done, Hephaestus placed the armor before Thetis, each piece humming with divine resonance. It shone not with reflection, but with inner fire. "Take it," he said. "No hand mortal or divine will ever make its equal." And so the fire gave birth to dawn. Thetis rose into the mortal world. Her passage was swift, the armor hidden in lightless shimmer as she crossed from forge to battlefield. By dawn she reached the Greek camp. The Myrmidons gathered at the sight, the metal alive with morning fire, the shield a world in miniature, the armor breathing like a second skin. When Achilles stepped forward, silence fell. He touched the bronze, and it fit him as if the gods themselves had shaped it for this moment. And they had. The bronze seemed to merge with his flesh, the man in the armor no longer separate. Agamemnon came, surrounded by kings and counselors. The ceremony was formal, but the air heavy with tension. He returned Briseis, offered gold and gifts, and words that sounded like apology but carried no warmth. Achilles accepted not for forgiveness, but for vengeance. The time for honor had passed. Only blood could speak now. At dawn, the camp stirred. The Myrmidons prepared armor polished to mirror light, spears sharpened to sing. Their battle cry rolled like thunder. Across the plain, Trojans heard it and trembled. Achilles led them, a living flame in divine bronze. The sun caught his armor and scattered fire across the field. The first Trojan outposts fell instantly. Veterans who had known victory for months found terror instead, for no mortal could stand against what now came. Achilles descended upon them like judgment, made flesh a storm of bronze and fury, each strike precise, each kill inevitable. The shield flashed with light, the spear struck like lightning. And from that morning on, the earth remembered only one sound, the sound of vengeance unleashed. Achilles moved like fire, his spear a streak of bronze lightning. Each thrust precise, lethal, found the smallest gap, the perfect point of ruin. No man could match him. He struck 3 foes before the first had fallen, his speed a blur, his rhythm death. The armor shone as if alive, turning aside blades, deflecting arrows, letting him move as though the weight of metal were air itself. The Trojans broke. Their courage melted before him. Rumors spread Achilles has returned. And panic followed faster than truth. Men who had faced heroes now fled, unable to meet the gaze of one whose name had become legend. Fear itself fought beside him. Through the lines he carved a path, relentless, methodical, until even the earth rebelled. The river overflowed, choked with bodies. Its waters ran red and thick, groaning under the weight of the dead. The god of that river rose in wrath, voice echoing like thunder beneath the surface. "Enough," he cried. "You defile my stream with mortal blood." But Achilles, consumed, did not stop. The current surged against him, waves clawed at his feet, eddies formed like grasping hands. Yet he stood firm, armor gleaming, feet braced on the trembling bed of the river. He struck even the flood, and it split around him. When the waters withdrew, he rose nearer to Troy than any man before him. The walls loomed white stone, 60 feet high, smooth as glass, their towers bristling with bronze and bows. From above, Priam watched, the weight of age heavy in his eyes. His kingdom stood on the edge of ending. Below, the gates opened, and Hector stepped forth. He wore the armor taken from Patroclus, Achilles' own gift of the gods. A cruel mirror. Divine bronze now turned against its maker. The setting sun flashed across the plates, 2 heroes advancing across the plain of destiny. Silence fell, no laughter, no wagers, only breath held as gods and men watched. This was the end. One would fall, and with him, an age. Hector moved first, measured, calm, the perfect soldier. Shield forward, spear poised, eye steady. Achilles, incandescent, closed the distance like a storm. His armor glowed from within, his movements too swift to follow. When their weapons met, the sound shattered the air. Bronze rang against bronze, a peal that shook the city walls. Hector struck for the neck, the narrow gap between helm and cuirass, but the divine metal turned his spear aside. The blow sparked light across the field. Achilles countered a downward thrust for the hip, and Hector barely caught it with his shield, the force sending tremors through his arm. They circled, dust rising around their feet, two shadows within a storm of light. Each strike answered by another, each step measured, each breath a prayer. The crowd on Troy's walls watched their mirrored dance, life and death in balance. Achilles blurred his image, splitting in the sun, his steps too fast to see. Even Hector, master of control, felt the ground slipping beneath his certainty. Still he fought for his city, his wife, his son. Every block, every parry was a wall against annihilation. Achilles fought for none of these. He fought for wrath alone, for Patroclus, for vengeance, for the gods who had shaped his fate. His anger had become divine, not human fury, but elemental force. Each strike fell like thunder. And then the gods themselves intervened. Athena came masked as Deiphobus, Hector's brother, a voice of comfort in the chaos. "Now, brother," she urged, "strike while he tires." And Hector, believing, gathered all his strength, ready to make his final stand. Hector moved, trusting the voice beside him. He thought it was his brother. It was Athena. That one step, that single shift of balance was all Achilles needed. He saw the opening, the small, perfect space between helmet and cuirass, and struck. The spear flashed like lightning, piercing bronze, flesh, and air alike. It passed through Hector's neck, clean, final. The sound, a single breath, then silence. Troy's walls erupted in screams. Priam's cry tore the sky. The hope of a city fell with its prince. Achilles stood over him, breathing not from effort, but from fury. Hector's lips moved. He begged only one thing: honor in death. "Return my body," he said, "to my father. Let me not feed the dogs." But Achilles, beyond reason, beyond mercy, answered with darkness. "No burial, no peace. You'll feed the earth as you fed my grief." Even the armor he wore seemed to pulse with rage, a bronze heart beating to the rhythm of vengeance. He stripped Hector piece by piece, his own armor reclaimed from his enemy's corpse. The bronze gleamed again on the man it was forged for, but no triumph could soothe the wound inside. Then the unthinkable. He pierced the prince's ankles, threaded rawhide through, and tied the body to his chariot. The divine horses stamped, their hooves striking sparks. The wheels turned. The dust rose. And Hector, once the pride of Troy, was dragged in circles around his city's walls. The sound, thud, stone, flesh, repeated endlessly, a rhythm of horror. Men watched, frozen. Women screamed. Even Greeks turned away. Priam tore his hair, his robes turned to ash, his crown heavy as despair. Andromach's voice cut through the chaos, a cry not of grief, but of ruin. Her child doomed, her city finished, her world gone. But vengeance, once fed, began to hunger again. Night fell. In the Greek camp, wine flowed. Victory songs rose. Yet unease coiled beneath the laughter. They had won, but at what cost? Achilles sat apart, eyes fixed on nothing. The divine armor shone, but inside emptiness. He dragged the body again the next day, and the next. Each circuit feeding fury, never easing pain. The gods began to whisper. Apollo shielded Hector's flesh, keeping it whole, for even the sun could not bear such cruelty. Zeus watched. The scales of justice trembled. Heroes had become beasts, and grief had devoured greatness. Among mortals, Achilles stood alone, a man wrapped in glory, and utterly lost to it. Even among his comrades, Achilles stood apart. They praised his victories, but could not touch his pain. The divine spark that set him above men now walled him from them. No laughter, no counsel, no comfort, only the endless echo of loss. And then from within Troy's shattered walls came the one man bold enough to face the monster grief had made, Priam. Old, broken, but unbent. The father of Hector, king of a dying city. He chose the unthinkable to walk alone into the camp of his enemy, to kneel before the man who had murdered his son, not for vengeance, for love. He gathered treasures, golden tripods, silver bowls, armors woven with gold thread, stones from lands beyond the sea. A ransom fit not for a corpse but for a god. He harnessed the mules himself, hands trembling, heart steady. Hermes descended unseen to guide him through the sleeping Greek lines. The wagon rolled in silence, its bronze wheels whispering over dust. Guards looked and saw nothing. At last, Priam reached the Myrmidon camp. Before him rose Achilles' pavilion, a fortress of shadow and fire. Inside lamps flickered, casting light across bronze, across weapons that ended countless lives. And there Achilles sat, a god in flesh, a man hollowed by rage. The old king entered, every step defiance of death. His robes torn, his hair gray with dust, his voice steady. "Remember your father," he said. "Think of him old, waiting, and of what he would feel if he lost you as I have lost my son." The words pierced deeper than any spear. For the first time in years, Achilles felt something break inside, not armor, but silence. The room itself seemed to dim. The glow from his divine bronze faded, as if the fury within it had finally met something stronger, compassion. Priam's plea was more than a bargain. It was the voice of every father who had ever mourned, every man who had ever loved. And Achilles, the killer of heroes, the breaker of armies, wept. Something changed in Achilles. The storm at last began to calm. The divine armor, once blazing with vengeance, grew still. Its glow faded, replaced by the quiet weight of humanity. For the first time, Achilles saw himself in another's sorrow. He looked at Priam and saw his own father. He looked at Hector and saw his own death. The rage dissolved not in weakness, but in understanding. He nodded, and the words came softly. "Take him home." What followed was reverent, deliberate, the return of dignity to what war had defiled. Achilles washed the body himself. Water ran red, then clear. He anointed Hector's skin with divine oils from Priam's treasure, wrapped him in white linen, and fastened the bindings with polished bronze. The same metal that had once been shaped into weapons now served to protect the dead. When the chariot stood ready, Achilles chose 12 Myrmidons not as guards, but as escort. They formed around the wagon, their bronze catching dawn light, faces solemn warriors attending peace. Priam climbed aboard. The wheels creaked, but this time, no blood marked their path. Days later, Achilles gathered his men again, not for war, but for remembrance. The funeral games of Patroclus. Chariots thundered across the plain, their bronze wheels flashing in the sun. Dust rose like incense to the gods. Then came boxing, wrestling, the tests of strength and endurance that had forged heroes before battle ever did. Sweat replaced blood. Cheers replaced screams. The archers followed, bows bending, strings singing, their arrows whispering through the air like prayers to fallen friends. Each contest, each victory, was an offering, a way to honor the dead by proving the living still carried fire. Yet peace was not the end. New threats stirred beyond Troy's walls. Among them, the Amazon queen, Penthesilea, bronze-clad, fearless, leading her army of warrior women. They came not as mourners but as vengeance reborn. Penthesilea, the Amazon queen, rode into battle like a storm given shape. Her double-bladed axe flashed with light, each swing precise, practiced, divine. Her bow, a blur of motion, sent arrows slicing through air, even as her horse galloped full stride. Bronze gleamed across her form, etched with the marks of royalty, and upon her shield the sign of Ares, her father. When she met Achilles, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. She struck first, a whirlwind of bronze and fury. Her army fast, fluid, cut through Greek lines like smoke and flame. But Achilles, still the god-touched killer, moved with inhuman calm. Every parry, every counter, was measured, inevitable. The sound of their weapons, bronze against bronze, rang across the plain like the voice of war itself. At last, his spear found its opening. The bronze pierced deep. Her eyes, once alight with battle, softened, almost peaceful. When she fell, the cry of the Amazons shook the walls of Troy. Their queen, their last wild hope, was gone, but fate was not yet done. From the south came Memnon, the prince of Ethiopia, a son of the dawn. His armor shone like sunrise on obsidian seas, forged by divine hands to rival even Hephaestus' art. He came with warriors from distant lands, their blades curved, their shields dark as night, their gods still watching. Achilles faced him, divine against divine. Spear met spear, each strike birthing sparks that drifted upward like newborn stars. They moved faster than thought, each reading the other's rhythm, each blow echoing through dust and thunder. The air trembled, the walls of Troy shook. For a moment, the world hung balanced, two sons of gods, equal in might, equal in destiny. Then Zeus turned his gaze. And fate, silent until now, chose. Memnon faltered. The light of his divine armor dimmed. Achilles' spear struck true. The Dawn Prince fell. And with him fell Troy's last miracle. Only mortals remained now, and prophecy moved closer, its shadow long and certain. Paris, guided by Apollo's unseen hand, drew his bow. And somewhere, in the armor's perfect bronze, waited the one mortal flaw. High above the battlefield, Paris drew his bow. The prince of Troy, no match for Achilles in strength, but today he had the god of archery at his side. Apollo's hand guided his aim. The bronze arrowhead shimmered, blessed, poisoned, perfect. It would find the one place no armor could protect. The arrow flew, a whisper, a breath of wind, and then the strike. The heel. The prophecy spoken long ago fulfilled itself in silence. The mark left untouched when Thetis had dipped her infant son into the Styx. The shaft quivered, and the great Achilles staggered. At first it seemed nothing. A scratch. A wound beneath notice. But the poison worked fast. The divine glow faded. The bronze armor, once weightless, pressed down like stone. The world dimmed. The air thickened. He tried to raise his spear and found it heavy as the years he would never have. The prophecy spoken long ago fulfilled itself in silence. All around him, battle raged. Greeks and Trojans fought like madmen for the body of the man who had defied gods. Ajax stood over him, a living wall of bronze. Odysseus beside him, quick-minded, sharp eyes together, driving back wave after wave until, at last, they bore their fallen champion home. The pyre rose high, built from rare woods and drenched in sacred oil. Bronze gleamed beneath the flames. Weapons. Shields. All that he had carried and all that had carried him. From the depths of the sea, Thetis came once more. Her cries broke the silence of the shore. The ocean swelled in answer, waves pounding in grief. Silver rain fell upon the pyre, a mother's tears for a mortal son. And through fire his spirit rose, returning to the light from which it came. Thus ended the age of heroes. Then came the final dispute, the judgment of the arms. Ajax and Odysseus, both heroes, both proud, stood before the council. Who would claim the armor of Achilles, Who was worthy of wearing a god's gift? Not the strongest, but the cleverest was chosen. Odysseus received the bronze. Ajax's heart broke beneath the decision, but the songs began that night. Around every fire, the bards sang his name. Achilles swift-footed, god-born, doomed. The boy who hid among maidens and became death incarnate. The man who chose glory over life. And so, his story outlived him. Long after Troy's towers fell, long after the sea reclaimed its dead, his name still burned in human memory, a flame that would never die. As long as courage mattered, as long as men sought greatness, Achilles would walk among them,